Hi everybody and welcome back to the Luco Show, the September economic update, the Quadrant. Why have I called it the Quadrant? Because there are four things that I want to talk about, and Quadrant sounds pretty cool and pretty sexy. So we're going to crack straight into it. Pre-crash and triggers for the crash will lead into the crash that's coming quickly, post-crash, and then what comes next. These are all really important things for literally every single person in the world to know about. So take half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it is, and digest all the information that we're going to go through today. If you want to challenge anything or add anything or have any questions or have any feedback or let me know that I'm wrong about something, pop it in the comment section and I'll get back to you and really appreciate any engagement whatsoever. I'm going to start quite importantly with a really important historical lesson that I've picked up from a book I've been reading on my Kindle called The Fruits of Graft by an author, Wayne Jett. I've just typed out an excerpt from that because it's just quicker to get through. But it's called The Fruits of Graft, Depressions Then and Now. And it's a bit of a play on words from the famous John Steinbeck depression-age novel called The Grapes of Wrath. So The Fruits of Graft is what this is called. I actually got that Kindle at Christmas because to order the book, which I really wanted to order, it was something like $100 to order the book just from America. But if you got a Kindle and you downloaded the Kindle edition, it was only like $10. So I ended up getting a Kindle and the book for half the price that I would have spent if I just ordered the book. So basically this historical lesson that we're about to go through is it should give you a real eye-opening example as to how things are likely going to unfold if you put your full faith and trust in government looking after you in times of real economic turmoil and jeopardy. And this is really important because whilst there are a lot of different things that we cannot do in terms of this crash is coming, it's going to be like one of these triggers, or potentially some other, is going to be like the straw that broke the camel's back for the inevitable crash. However, post-crash and what comes after that, the future is in our hands to a certain degree. If we leave it to the government, well, this example right now will give you a real eye-opening example as to how things may unfold if we just leave it to the government. So, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of the four fatheads on Mount Rushmore in America, savior of the American people throughout the Depression. So you will hear on the media, so you will hear on different historical documentaries, or what you will hear from Keynesian economists. BS, right? You cannot argue with the facts that I'm about to read out for you. So this comes from chapter 6 of The Fruits of Graft by Wayne Jett. The subsection is called Amidst Poverty, Government Enrichment. The World Gold Council preserves data collected from central banks and governments, including the US Treasury of gold reserves held from 1845 to the present day. What the data reveal is jaw-dropping and would shock most Americans who continue to revere Franklin Delano Roosevelt. During the first 30 years of the 20th century, so from 1900 until 1930, US gold reserves grew strongly and steadily, increasing from 600 metric tons in 1900 to 6,350 tons in 1930, a more than tenfold rise in 30 years. So, first 30 years of the 20th century, 1900 to 1930, the US gold reserves increased by tenfold, 10 times. Now, that's until 1930. The crash, which preceded the Great Depression, happened in 1929. So they had all these gold reserves at 1930. Under the rules of the gold standard, monetization of these reserves would provide Americans with greater buying power. What is extraordinary, even shocking, is the path that was followed by US gold reserves between 1930 and 1940. While Americans struggled from the worst economic depression in US history between 1931 and 1935, gold reserves in the federal vaults jumped 41% to 9,000 metric tons. So from 6,350 metric tons in 1930 to 9,000 tons in 1935. This is the status at the year end 1935 as millions of Americans faced utter starvation. But this was not the end of it. Between 1936 and 1940, Roosevelt's government made a leap forward in acquiring gold for the Treasury's vaults, a leap of staggering proportion. US gold reserves jumped from 9,000 metric tons in 1935 to 19,500 metric tons in 1940. During these 5 years of abject poverty for millions of Americans, Roosevelt added more gold to federal reserves, 10,500 more metric tons than the US Treasury had acquired previously in all of US history. A truly compassionate president might have even sold from the government's unprecedented reserves into foreign currency so the taxes could be cut even more and prosperity restored. No benevolent purpose can be ascribed to Roosevelt's actions. Ordinary Americans were impoverished and asset prices were kept low, enabling financial mercantilists and monopolists, so effectively big business and the elite wealthy class, with giant capital pools to acquire assets cheaply. This occurred entirely within FDR's presidency and could have only produced further significant contraction of a national economy already collapsing under forces of high taxes and prohibitive tariffs that shut down international trade. Roosevelt determined that tax money was better spent on gold to be stored in Treasury vaults rather than to be left in the hands of American taxpayers trying to earn a living, raise a family, or build a business. What motivated a political leader to such an end? In what moral or ethical grounds does a government impoverish its own people to enrich itself? Franklin Roosevelt more than trebled the US gold reserves of the US Treasury within 8 years, producing the most impoverished decade in American history. He did this while imposing strict limitations against the monetization of government gold so as to prevent the people from prospering. This reprehensible conduct has not been reported to the American people, much less justified by federal officials, historians, or economists. Economists have quailed at the task of identifying issues, pointing fingers and laying blame for the Great Depressions. Economic causes of the Great Depression are there to identify and to rectify, but doing so requires determination to confront mercantilism. Okay. That's pretty heavy reading if you're not familiar with that information already, which I'd say 99.999% of people are not. 1900 to 1930, US gold reserves grew tenfold. Then they had the biggest crash in US history. So, as the US dollar was on the gold standard at the time, what FDR could have done was he could have gone to the Federal Reserve and said, look, you can use the gold that we have in our US Treasury and you can issue new dollars. You can monetize the gold, issue new dollars, create stimulation for the economy. We're back on track. No, what did he do? He doubled down and he trebled down on the purchase of gold. So first of all, crashes in 1929. Technically, the technicality of it is it becomes a depression in 1931. It stretches on, right? 1933, FDR signs a piece of legislation which says, okay, all ordinary US citizens who are holding gold, you must give your gold to the US government at a price of $20.67 per ounce. 6 months later, he signed another piece of legislation. It was passed whereby the value of a dollar was devalued from $20.67 per ounce to $35 per ounce. So effectively, if you were an ordinary average Joe American and you'd done a really good job in acquiring some gold before that economic collapse, you're sitting on the gold. Whatever amount of gold that you have per ounce, it's worth $20.67. You're forced to give that away. And they give you cash, and then they dilute the value of that cash to effectively 50% because FDR moved it from $20.67 to $35 for 1 ounce of gold. So yeah, that was just abhorrent. And then they spent the following years, from 1933 to 1940, buying more gold from countries around the world. Additionally to that, in 1930, just before FDR became president, Herbert Hoover signed the Smoot-Hawley Tariffs, which are another one of the major triggers and things which elongated and deepened the Great Depression. What that effectively did was eliminate all international trade. Now, what had happened in the 1920s, while the roaring 20s were going on in America, if you look over to a little country in Europe called Germany, who had just lost World War I, 1918 it ends. Then we have the Treaty of Versailles, where there is an agreement that Germany will have to pay war reparations to the Allied nations. Now, they were so pressed, pushed tight, unable to realistically pay those reparations in the 20s, that they devalued their own currency in order to try and muster a challenge to pay those reparations. That led to a crazy hyperinflation in Germany. I'm sure you've seen those pictures of, people wheeling around buckets of cash type thing, because effectively they were just trying to get a loaf of bread with like all the cash that they had in the world, because the currency in Germany was effectively worthless because of hyperinflation at that time. Then as a result of that, as a result then of the Smoot-Hawley tariffs in 1930, that was just like the death knell for Germany. They just could not, because they couldn't trade anymore with America, without except for in cases of like really ridiculously high tariffs. That was like game, set and match. And as a result, this kind of really aggressive nationalistic feeling brewed in Germany, and that led to the position where someone like Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party could come into power. So if you're learning in your school books, in school, they kind of teach you like, oh yeah, the Nazis were kind of bad, back in the 20th century there. You have to, you gotta get to the situation where you're playing chess when everyone else is playing checkers, and start to kind of read through the step-by-step logic of how these things came about. And men who are now revered, like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, are at fault more than anyone, arguably, or certainly close to it, than any other political leader in the 20th century. So, if we just rely on government, by the very nature that government is one, inefficient, and two, in this kind of weird crony capitalism, socialism blend of a hybrid that we're in at the moment, it's a situation where the ordinary people, the middle class, are taxed percentage-wise higher than everyone else, exponentially so. In terms of income taxes, they're way higher than corporation tax, capital gains tax, or anything like that. And the working classes, are so suppressed that they can't even get into the middle class, which is being eradicated, every passing month effectively. So it's not a good situation. In my opinion, what we need to do is massively reduce the influence of government to find a situation where we have minimal, low, if any, income tax. And there are, sounds crazy, there are a number of ways that you can have a functioning world economy with very little or no income tax, if you were to replace it with the Henry George land tax as an example. But we'll get to that again. But yeah, so that's just something to think about in terms of, if we rely on the government, look, history shows and history repeats itself. That's historical fact. And yeah, I wouldn't be in a hurry to assume that we're going to be all smooth and jolly if we effectively have this utter capitulation and it's completely left in the hands of the government to deal with things. So the government create these scenarios by this crazy money printing with central banks and bailing out mercantilists, as Wayne Jett kept alluding or referring to. Mercantilists, if you look at today's mercantilists, it's the Gates of the world, it's the Facebooks, it's the Apples of the world, all these companies that are being bailed out on this exponential scale with the crazy money printing that we've seen, that is pushing stocks like Amazon, like Apple, more recently like Zoom, to all these insane high market capitalization values. So anyway, that in itself is enough information for you for this month's update, I think, just to get the brain firing. But I'll just really quickly fly through the quadrant. So pre-crash and triggers. Now, Apple fell yesterday, share price, by 8%, and it's down a couple of percent today, meaning that in one day, the value of an Apple share, basically a 24-hour period, is down by over 10%. So we're in this crazy volatile period where Is that the start of the crash? Potentially. I personally think on a probability basis, this is like the last consolidation before we do one push higher, before we have a pan sell-off whereby every asset just tanks in value. I'll get to that quickly. But the reason why I don't think that this, and it may be, but I don't think that this last couple of days where the markets are starting to turn bloody, I don't think that this is the big crash just yet, because there aren't enough of these pre-crash triggers that have occurred yet. And again, it will be one of these which, probably is the straw that breaks the camel's back, but you're not sure which. It's kind of like whenever Tyson Fury was finishing off Deontay Wilder before the ref stepped in. You don't know which punch is going to cause the ref to step in. You know it's coming, you know what's going to happen, but one of them at some stage, you can't pinpoint it obviously, but right, news flow. Let me explain that first of all. I hope through learning things like this, people start realizing that the news is heavily, the mainstream media is heavily misleading on a number of fronts. I first became to realize that as I became more acquainted with economics and started to realize that, hang on, you guys are telling me to buy every time things are about to dump, and you guys are telling me to be scared every time, I should really be buying, or, so these are the kind of like logical steps that you start to follow. Then you start to realize that there's a pattern here. Hang on, they're pretty much misleading me in every single way, in every single issue, always, forever. Drumming up hate, drumming up division, and all sorts of things like this. So anyway, news flow. When you start to see on kind of like home pages of BBC, home pages of Sky News, CNN, RT, things like this, economy is buoyant after Apple and Microsoft hit $1 trillion market caps, and shares are going up loads and things are good. When they start telling you and pumping this idea that things are good, buy, things are good, buy, that is the biggest sign in history to get out, sell everything, run, just keep running, cash, get into it, run. So news flow. Our news flow is not yet euphoric enough to make me believe that enough ordinary folk have been suckered into the market effectively in order for it to capitulate. Furlough schemes, UK. Okay, so the furlough scheme this month, September, for the first time, I think it's employers have to pay 20% and of the wages for furloughed staff, and the government pay 80%. So we're moving in a direction now where in October, I think it's due to be 100% back to employers paying wages. Now, there's going to be a situation, obviously, where these businesses just close. Like, so many businesses are going to close because demand is going to be so much lower. They're or as low as it is now, but they're not going to be able to just keep paying these wages. So it's inevitably going to lead to a lot of unemployment. Whenever you have unemployment, there's kind of this dominoes-esque effect in terms of not being able to, of defaulting on different debt obligations, and demand for goods and services in the economy going down, and we have this dominoes-esque effect. Stimulus checks in the US. So I think this is going to tie in with news flow in the sense that stimulus checks were given out in America initially to in a similar way to the way in which furlough schemes were in the UK. Now, if there's a second kind of main wave of stimulus checks given out in America, I think that will, if that ties in with news flow that's effectively telling you to buy shares, all that's going to do is provide liquidity for professional institutions, people like Goldman Sachs, to sell out of their positions into the hands of Postman Pat, the average Joe who's been misled into buying these shares. So whenever we start to see the end of UK furlough schemes, news flow starts to get really euphoric. Stimulus checks, possibly additional ones, this is a bit of a hypothetical, but probably will happen in the US, are given out again. This is also feeding in right into the time of the US presidential election. There's a lot of talk, especially from the Biden end, that there will be an increase in tax from financial year 2021 starting. So that's from April, the start of April. But effectively, look, if you're in a situation where the capital gains tax, so gains on investments that you have, gains on housing, real estate investments that you have or shares or whatever is going to go up from the start of the new financial year. What does that do? If you're like, right, I can crystallize and cash in my profit now and pay, say, what is capital gains now? Something like 20%, 28% in the UK anyway at the moment, if you're a higher rate taxpayer. If I know now that I can cash in whatever my investment is at, say, 20% capital gains tax, but I know that the capital gains tax threshold is going to increase from April 2021 to, say, 40%. What am I going to do? I'm going to sell my asset right now. So that's another triggering event that could occur straight away. Second wave, as you can see, I have put that in inverted commas. Second wave, take from that what you will in terms of what I think about this whole thing. Move to more remote work / learning. Yeah, this also feeds in with the this feeds in with housing. I should have put it up there, but effectively commercial real estate, people are working from home. Now they've just started to put kids back in school and things like this, but this second wave is obviously going to fail, and then people are going to have to work from home, learn from home. There's going to be a massive push towards remote working, remote learning. As a result, there will be a pretty heavy fall in demand for commercial property, especially in major hubs, major finance cities and things like this. So again, the dominoes effect will be, look, there's no demand. If there's no demand for buildings in the middle of a city centre, the price goes down. The asking price goes down because no one wants it. And it goes down quickly, and then it's like Jenga. It's like a big Jenga tower falling over. So that'll obviously have ramifications to the normal housing market, because people typically buy houses in those cities because they want to be close to that central hub. But everyone's going to be told that they have to work from home. Who knows how long this sort of thing's going to go on for, but all of these things are pre-crash triggers, which, if this last couple of days bloody stock markets isn't the start of the crash, one of these will inevitably lead to the start of the crash. So in the next few weeks, I do think that there probably will be one more big spike upwards. Then we will get this kind of constant news flow about buying. You should buy more stocks. Don't do it. Today is your angel on your shoulder lesson to let you know. Stay safe, get in cash if you can. If you want to kind of hedge something, if you have any money, if you want to hedge something with gold, silver, or Bitcoin, whatever, your call. But I personally think cash, specifically US dollars, are going to be the go-to place for the next 1 or 2 years, and then I would be moving into gold, silver, or Bitcoin. And we've touched on this last month, but I'll just quickly kind of wrap through now. So once the crash starts, pan sell-off. What does pan sell-off mean? All assets tank in value. So I personally believe, as a result of the way in which all assets have been performing recently, shares have been going up, bonds the same, real estate. I was reading in some newspaper yesterday being like, post-lockdown boom in real estate. Like, the only reason that we're getting, again, touching this last month, but just in case you didn't see it, where does the demand for real estate come from? Well, first of all, we've got lower interest rates than ever before. The last 320 years, the average interest rate, base rate of the Bank of England has been 6%. What is it now? 0.1%. It's been less than 1% for the first time ever, every year for the last 10 years. So effectively, people can get mortgages that are incredibly small in terms of the interest rate repayments. Banks are more willing than ever to lend to anyone as long as they can prove any form of monthly income. They also have Help to Buy houses, all these different schemes, co-ownership schemes, and different things like this. And now, more recently, they've done this removal of stamp duty type deal to, again, encourage more people to do the same. So, yeah, for me, it's really, I don't mean to be insensitive, but this is just my full economic head on in terms of where we're heading. So, just if you're thinking about buying a house or something, my best recommendation would be don't. Crypto's been going through the roof recently. Precious metals, gold, silver, everyone's kind of getting... It's funny how arrogant, audacious, naive people get whenever they're like, oh yeah, gold's going through the roof, you're an idiot if you're not in it, man. All these assets are going up. As soon as there's a major crash, there'll be just a massive rush for cash. Even, I was looking at it, I don't have the figures here, I was looking at it yesterday. In 2008, whenever we had the crash in 2008, now from 2008 for the next few years, there was a massive bull run for gold. Gold went up. But initially in 2008, I think it was from March to October 2008, gold fell by 30%, which is major for a hedge against, something like a crash that's supposedly meant to do well in the good times. It fell 30% from March to October 2008. It did something very similar in, I looked in 1999, 2000. I think it was 2000 after the dot-com bubble burst. It fell by, I think it was 50 or 20, it fell by 25% before it then moved upwards again over the following few years. Now, 1929 specifically, because it was on the dollar was in the gold standard, it was kind of a fixed amount, so we can't see how it reacted then because it wasn't, part of an open market exchange at that stage. But yeah, gold's going to tank short term. If we're going to have the biggest crash ever, everything's going to go down. Everyone's going to rush to cash. What you do hear increasingly, and what you probably will hear in terms of the misleading news flow, is you'll hear, like Ray Dalio has been talking about cash is trash, and all this. All these mouthpieces of the New World Order gang are just misleading the average person at every turn. So and the elitely wealthy kind of people know about this. They're sitting on cash, and they're kind of getting ready to, as they did, the mercantilists in that book, The Fruits of Graft, around the Depression 90 years ago. They're going to be sitting pretty, waiting in cash for assets to just tank in value. So I've also added in livestock. Been chatting to someone recently who, has interests, or family who have interests in that. So it's something to consider, because effectively, if all these assets fall in value, it will too. And effectively anything high end. So if you're going to I just don't think these will exist for the next few years, unfortunately, but like any fancy ice cream places or fancy coffee shops or fancy cocktail places, the demand for these sorts of places is going to go really, really down as an inevitable kind of consequence of all these things happening. So crash, post-crash, there will be an initial big sell-off followed by a slow bleed. So that's, again, I don't want to say things that are really negative seeming. I'm trying to just be as accurate with what I know as possible, but yeah, typically in this sort of scenario, there is initially a big sell-off, and then, it's the sort of scenario where you do not want to buy the dip, as they say. It's kind of like, just sit on cash, spend as little as possible, and ride it out for as long as you can. Become more of a stoic type individual and save your money as best you can, because things are going to just tighten and continue to tighten over the the coming months and years. So get yourself as ready for that as you can. That's all I can say. And help community and help everyone where you can. Literally, if you get stuck in yourself, your own problems, negativity will come out, and that's the direction we don't want to go. If we can really build a community relationship type thing and help others, that whole JFK, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country type idea needs to come into our heads. We need to look at everything in terms of responsibility, and that's how you survive. You survive these sort of really challenging times by embracing responsibility, embracing purpose, and helping wherever you can. Inflation, so post-crash, inflation, as supply is reduced, prices for in-demand goods will increase. Okay, so again, we talked about this last month. Milton Friedman used to talk about the data where any increase in the money supply, so an increase in money printing effectively, and the purchase of debt by central banks, initially in the first 6 months leads to a boom. The first 6 months, especially the longer it moves in that 6 month period, shares go up, stock markets go up, and that's what we've seen from March the whole way to now. Effectively everything's just gone up. Now from 6 months to 18 months, typically that benefit of the stimulation starts to dip, and we move to a scenario where inflation, the cost of goods and services, starts to go up. So this will largely happen because as these pre-crash triggers lead to the crash, so many more businesses are going to close. And if businesses close and people are tightening the belt in terms of, well, one, if businesses close, there'll be a lot more unemployment, there'll be a lot more disposable income. people will not have money to spend as easily, and they will tighten the belt surely where they can. As a result of this, supply will reduce. So the more places that close effectively, there is less supply. So when supply is reduced, demand for kind of essential goods is going to remain the same. Might dip a little, but it'll still remain high. So for those essential goods, prices are almost certainly going to rise. Well, they are going to rise. So at this point, we come to a decision point regarding the interest rate. So where are we now? The base rate of the Bank of England, UK as an example, is 0.1%, the minimum lending rate of the Bank of England. So can that be reduced at all? Well, no Western country has ever had a scenario before where we go into negative interest rates. And this is effectively the choice that central banks and the government are going to have. One, do we decrease the interest rate, move into negative interest rates, or do we increase it to its historic norm effectively, or something like that? Now, if we increase the interest rate, it will be a prolonged normal crash effectively, a standard bear market continuation, in the sense that, look, if you go from 0.1% of a base rate to, say, 6%, what that does is it just increases any monthly repayment anyone has in terms of their mortgage, in terms of any loans that they may have, in terms of their car that they have in finance or lease or something like that. Now, very short term, it may be a fixed payment if it's, say, a mortgage, but chances are that your mortgage is over something like 30 years and the fixed period is only maybe 5 years. So inevitably it will get to the stage where the interest rate catches up to the new, higher, historical norm interest rate. The alternative is if we go into negative interest rates for the first time in history, the crash will be very confusing. It will continue in real terms, however, in nominal terms, it may not. So, and let me try and explain what that means effectively, but if we move into negative interest rates, that effectively means that the bank will be paying you interest to borrow money from them. Get your head around that concept. So in a scenario like that, you could theoretically see your house price could go up in terms of, like, it could go from 150 to your house could go from, say, £150,000 to £200,000, but the cost of your loaf of bread in that same period of time might go up from £1 to £4. So it'll be this really, is paradoxical a real word? It'll just be this strange, and it won't last forever because the whole thing's going to come crashing down with the end of fiat currency as a result of all this, but it'll be this temporary strange feeling period where it's very difficult to gauge the value of things, because everything will be moving up because banks are effectively paying people to take money and loans. So it'll be this scenario where money just becomes increasingly funny and it will lead to a hyperinflationary environment. Strongest likelihood, as a result of all this money printing, as a result of the never-ending credit expansion and debt cycle, coming to a crunch, that term credit crunch that you heard in the Great Recession just over 10 years ago, you'll be hearing that sort of thing again. It'll almost certainly end in the death of fiat currency, i.e. pound, dollars and euro as we know them. Then what comes next? There will probably be, in all likelihood, a push from big government and the global kind of cabal type peeps for a digital currency, a digital dollar, things like this. What we can do, first of all, what we can do is we can leave it to the government. Nice smiley emoji with a sticky out tongue there. I'm an awful drawer. I'm pretty good at some things, not very good at that. Writing, pretty bad at writing as well. But yeah, we can leave it to the government. Well, Mr. Wayne Jett has told us how things went in America anyway. The land of the supposedly free. Whenever they relied on Franklin Delano, Xavier Roosevelt, and Herbert Hoover and geezers like this, didn't go so well. And I don't know about you guys, but the crop that we're having at the moment of career politicians and all these people who don't really, they don't embody that I am here for service, I am here to serve you type feeling. So I don't know, I wouldn't personally trust people that are in there now to save me and my family and friends and local community and wider community and loved ones. But that's why it's up to the ordinary person to become knowledgeable, become informed, to speak out on these things whenever they feel that they need to speak out. So yeah, more of this sort of thing, and engage. Stop standing on the sidelines. Stop saying nothing. Stop. If you hear something, you disagree with it on the radio, you phone in, you challenge. You challenge, you challenge, you challenge, you resist, you challenge. That's how good triumphs over evil, always, ultimately, and it always will. Things that we must have. We must have low or no income tax. We're in a situation now where, you pay VAT on everything. You pay national contributions on everything. Oh, but thank you, NHS. Jeepers, do you see that everywhere? It's everywhere. Thank you, NHS. Clap, clap. The people who work for the NHS are wonderful individuals, wonderful people, hardworking, give their all. But you got to realise that this whole rhetoric is part of a bigger way of duping people effectively, because what's inevitably going to happen is whenever there is a crash and there's a big push towards socialism, a push towards much higher interest rates, even though we're already at ridiculously high interest rates whenever you factor in income tax, value-added tax, national insurance contributions, capital gains tax, corporation tax, they're going to say things like, oh, well, if you want the NHS, and we all know how good it is because we keep telling you how good it is, even though, like, if you actually need an operation and you've spent your last 40 years paying tax, we might see it. We might have a 5-year waiting list to give you that new hip, or you can just go and pay it privately. I mean, you've spent your entire life paying taxes, but you're if you actually want the thing that you're entitled to, well, you can go and pay it privately, unless you've got private insurance with Bupa or something. The whole thing's a mess. The people that work there are brilliant, but the whole infrastructure organisation is a mess. We need to kind of like go down to square one again. Square one. Small government, first of all, low tax. If you've low or no tax and you just get to work, and you can actually have no tax, there are scenarios where you can, have effectively a world where entrepreneurs are the ones who corporations are the ones who foot the bill in terms of the tax. If you want to just have, say, a land tax scenario, if you're just working your own land, you won't pay much tax at all. I don't mean working your old land necessarily in the old school way, although nice life, I'd like it. I'm gonna have it. But if you're not having these large premises to generate income type thing, then you will then you'll not have much tax to pay. That's a scenario which Albert Einstein, Milton Friedman really got behind, the Henry Georgian land tax approach. So it's something that can be done, although it's going to be difficult to move to something like that in reality. But low income tax is certainly something that we could find as a resolution, and we could do that through having small government who are effectively just traffic warden-esque. They just have like minimal interference in our day-to-day lives. Let people get on with it. Let people run their business, run their lives, stop interfering, get rid of the red tape and bureaucracy, get rid of all this sucking taxes out of people just to give it to big business, just so that they can do share buybacks and like the whole economy goes into this bubble and busts. Big government, bad. Big business are the only ones who have the resources to leverage and lobby big government. So big business, this is kind of where like rights and lefts kind of go against each other, but they don't really realise that both are sort of bad. It's kind of like big business on their own couldn't do half the things that they're able to do because government are effectively backing them. So absolutely, initially the government was there as kind of a safeguard, but it's got to the stage where because of the resources the big business has, because they can lobby, because they can do backhanders and all sorts, big business, mercantilists are always looked after at the expense of the ordinary citizen. So the more we get rid of big government, the more we make it challenging for big business, the more the average person can really plough their own way and stride on. Take back our liberty and freedom. So, like, yeah, I'm not going to get into that crap, but like, we're losing our liberties, we're losing our freedoms, and it's kind of like, it's like a sell. It's like if you're selling a product, it's like, oh, I'll give you this one product for free, you know, and it's okay, and then we'll give you this one, it's a wee bit more expensive, you know, but it's okay because, you know, you like that other one, and it's like, oh no, but you have to do this other one now, and you have to do this other one now, and you have to do this other one now. Oh yeah, just take that in your own, it's fine. You know, you might have kids, but your kids probably won't have kids. But it's okay because we need to, you know, reduce the world's population and things like that. I'll not get into any of that, but I'm just saying, cause and effect. Same people that are telling you things about the economy in a misleading way are the same people who are telling you about different things in a different way, and start using your heads. That's what I would say. Although I can be wrong. I've been wrong before. We'll see. Resist urge for anger, violence, and division. Yes. So as we've seen in America, chiefly in London and things like that as well, but in different places around the world, you know, a lot of things are coming to a head. Whenever there's uncertainty, whenever there's a rise in unemployment, and whenever there are socio-economic difficulties and uncertainty, tensions tend to bubble over. People kind of need something to do. So, you know, resist the urge to move towards anger, violence, and division. Instead, embrace responsibility. Choose love, respect, and personal responsibility. And that is how, ladies and gentlemen, we move forwards. Well, in a good, godly way. So yeah, last little thing I said, get your ass back to mass, make it a choice, not a chore. I'll never over-egg that, but I always like to add it in. So yeah, thanks for your time if you watched to the end. If you think any of your loved ones, people that you know, whatever, could benefit from this content, share it with them. Subscribe to the channel, engage in the comment section. Much love, have a great September. God bless.